Welcome to Loud Librarians Lead with Laura Kelly. Joining me today is Jennifer Widman, Director of South Dakota Center for Books, housed in the South Dakota Humanities Council, and Jean Patrick, children's author and children's services librarian from the Mitchell Public Library. They are here to share knowledge and their experience related to One Book South Dakota. Say hello, Jennifer and Jean.
Hi, everybody.
I am so excited you are both here and able to interview for the blog. It is wonderful just to have some different outlooks on the same topic. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you
for having us. Yes.
So we're going to start with Jennifer. Can you tell librarians across the state a little bit more about One Book South Dakota?
I would be happy to. I'm glad to be here. Librarians are some of our best partners in this particular program. So the One Book South Dakota started in 2003, which is the same year that we had our first Festival of Books. The South Dakota Center for the Book was established in 2002, and the very next year we jumped into what's really our core programming. So that means that this year, 2022, is going to be our 20th Festival of Books and our 20th One Book South Dakota selection. So it's a really exciting year. The idea behind the One Book South Dakota is that we choose a book that we think is very deeply discussable, that will have some appeal to all South Dakotans across a wide range of ages and backgrounds. And it doesn't have to have a South Dakota connection, but some of them do. We choose those books based on essentially the criteria that we think they will be appealing and discussable, that they will educate people and perhaps, engage them in a lot of different ways. So that could be fiction, it could be nonfiction. We try to have a mix of male and female authors. We try to have good representation of Native American authors as part of what we do. And the way the program works is that once that book is chosen and announced, we will order several hundred copies of it to keep on hand here at the South Dakota Humanities Council office. And organizations such as libraries, but many other groups as well, can apply to host a One Book South Dakota discussion. When they apply for a small fee, we'll send out those books and they will talk about them with their groups. And then we have, statewide discussions and different people giving their perspective on the books. And then the other criteria always is that the author needs to be willing to come to the South Dakota Festival of Books. And they make a keynote appearance at the festival. That's kind of the culmination of a full year. So we have the discussion elements, the culmination at the festival, and most years, if we possibly can, we also have a one book author tour. The author will go to libraries and other organizations in as many communities as he or she has time and energy to fit in. We have done anywhere from 3 to 20 One Book South Dakota author stops. And that gives groups who have discussed the book a little extra chance to maybe ask some questions of the author because they've discussed it in their group, maybe with a scholar from the Humanities Council leading them, maybe not, but they will have come up with some new questions and they might want to get the author's input or perspective on some of those things. And that's their chance in a slightly smaller setting to ask the author some questions before the big event at the Festival of Books. So we really think it's a great mix of us providing books, us providing a scholar to lead the discussion if desired, and then providing chances to meet the author. It's a really well-rounded way of reading, reflecting, and talking about a book.
Well, and we all know that librarians love to meet authors, so I'm sure that is a really exciting addition. I know that I was able to meet the author Kent Nerburn, who wrote Neither Wolf Nor Dog in 2019, One Book South Dakota, and it was definitely a highlight to personally hear them speak and ask questions. That is so exciting that is something that is offered every year. So thank you, Jennifer, for just giving us a deeper look into One Book South Dakota. Today, Jean Patrick is going to tell us how, as a librarian, that she has been involved in the South Dakota Humanities Council and One Book South Dakota.
Well, thank you. And thanks, Jennifer. I mean, you articulated that One Book program so well. I first got involved with the South Dakota Humanities Council long before I became a children's librarian. And it was back in 2004, I was doing an author visit at a school in Brookings, and I was all dressed up as the girl who struck out Babe Ruth. And afterwards, somebody from the Humanities Council, asked me if I'd be interested in being part of the Speakers Bureau. And I had never heard of that before, but basically it's a great way where schools and libraries can look through the individuals on the Speakers Bureau, and then the South Dakota Humanities Council generously can help, subsidize that author visit or whatever, whoever's on the Speakers Bureau. That was all wonderful. But then it even got better because about 4 years later, someone approached me and said, Jean, as a member of the Speakers Bureau, you're considered a scholar. And I go, whoa, a scholar, and being a scholar, would you like to help lead book discussions? Oh, and what could be better? So since I think it was about 2008, I've been leading book discussions every year, both Book Club to Go and the One Book South Dakota. And I tell you, I just love it. I mean, what can be better than going across the state or Zooming across the state and talking books with people? I just think the South Dakota Humanities Council in some ways is the best kept secret about the phenomenal things that they can do for libraries and community groups across the state.
Thank you, Jean, so much for sharing your experience. And yes, I know that word scholar might be a little intimidating, but we know that librarians are very knowledgeable about, lots of particular topics, and we love to learn. So I think it would be great to see more librarians as scholars. And if you know someone in your community that would be a great person to go and visit libraries and present, or other organizations, recommending and getting that word out that they can do that through the Humanities Council. Well, that leads me perfectly to my next question is, how can libraries get more involved with the One Book South Dakota?
Well, what you need to do is just simply go to our website, which is sdhumanities.org, and you'll find the opportunity to host a program, and you'll find an entire list of the Speakers Bureau scholars. You can browse through them. You can click on their picture. It will give you a whole list of the programs that they do. And so you will find that you can actually sort them by the One Book South Dakota discussion leaders and find one who might work for you. And it says where they live, so you know if they have to come from very far. But it's a very simple application that you'll find on that page. It's pretty short. It is a minimal fee of $50 for an in-person event. South Dakota Humanities Council will send out the books that you need, usually up to about 30 books that you can use and return. We will provide the scholar and pay that scholar stipend and any travel expenses that they might have. Speaking of that $50 fee, if there are libraries whose budgets are quite small, and I know there are many, we also have a sliding scale for those who maybe might find even that $50 fee a hardship. So don't hesitate to ask either in an email or a phone call or in the application itself. All of our contact information is there. As far as the One Book South Dakota author tour, that information also will be on the website. It is not there yet because we're still working on how that will happen, but we will send out the information on our e-newsletter. We will usually send something out through the state library listserv to let people know that applications are open to be a host of the One Book South Dakota author when he makes his tour. So keep an eye out for that. So everything's at sdhumanities.org. Perhaps this would be a good time for me to tell you who and what is the South Dakota selection this year. So
yes, please tell us more.
2022 One Book South Dakota, our 20th selection. Our History is the Future, written by Nick Estes. And it was published just a few years ago, and Nick was at the festival in 2019 when the book was brand new. It builds itself around the protests that were happening in 2016, 2017 up on Standing Rock, the No DAPL protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline. But that's really just a starting point. The rest of what the book does is to give a whole history of context for Native American activism and resistance in the service of various causes. So he moves backward and forward in time. He takes us back to first contact with European settlers. He goes through the Indian Wars. He talks about the damming of the Missouri River through the Pick-Sloan Plan. He talks about the American Indian movement of the 60s and 70s. And he just shows how all of that weaves together and how the same worldview, that indigenous worldview, and in particular, he focuses on the Osheti-Shakowin, the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota tribes of South Dakota, and how that worldview influences how they take care of the environment and how they advocate for their sovereign nationhood. And there couldn't be a better author than Nick to do this. He is a member of the Lower Sioux tribe who grew up in Chamberlain. He is a PhD scholar in history. He is incredibly well informed. He is also very well spoken. He has a great understanding from a tribal and a historical perspective of why these different movements have happened and why things coalesced in such a big way up at Standing Rock a few years ago. So I think this is a book that really South Dakotans will get a lot out of, and maybe we'll find out some things that they didn't know, even if they were watching news coverage of the protests. They'll find a lot more understanding of what's really happening.
Jennifer, I also noticed that you have discussion questions that librarians could use, or a patron could come in and lead a discussion as well, correct?
Yes, we do. We always try to provide some supporting materials for those discussions. And some years we create them ourselves, some years the publishers have created them. But I think the best resource we have this year was actually created by the Oak Lake Writers Society. They have just a 2-page discussion guide with some information about Nick and some context for the book. And he has been a member of the Oak Lake Writers Society for years and years and years. So they selected that book as one of their 10 choices for native reads. And they put together a wonderful study guide with 10 discussion questions. And we will send that out to any libraries who request. We can actually just send you a link because it is online. And we also make sure that our book discussion leaders have it. And we're happy to share it with individual readers anytime you want as well. So.
Awesome. That's so great that you were able to collaborate and just have such a great resource for all the libraries and patrons who are hosting a book discussion. All right, back to Jean. How does South Dakota One Book program run at the Mitchell Library?
Thanks for asking. As I mentioned earlier, I'm relatively new to the library world. I've been at the Mitchell Public Library for about 4.5 years. And last summer, we were trying to, work things out with summer programming. And of course, trying to figure out how to do things safely with COVID and everything. And we had a relatively new adult services librarian. And I said, Zach, just go to the South Dakota Humanities Council website, and you will find a long list of people on the Speakers Bureau. And best, we could even do a One Book South Dakota discussion, because guess what? The book was The Children's Blizzard. At first, he was a little bit reluctant, and I encouraged him, and he just jumped in with both feet. And it was just so fun to see how user-friendly that application is. It's not a scary grant application at all. Jennifer talked about the pricing is wonderful. And the best thing about One Book is that, like Jennifer mentions, they send you the books. As a library, you don't have to figure out how to buy all these or get them through interlibrary loan. The Humanities Council sends them to you in a box. And what we did at our library, we put some temporary barcodes on them so that we were able to keep track of them. But every library does that differently. We ended up having this book discussion outside. They chose not to use me for the scholar. Instead, we had Marilyn Carlson Aronson do it. And they did it outside, and we did it in a public place. We did it right next to the Corn Palace. And I believe that there were like 15 to 20 people, who came. And what a great way, not only to involve the community, but by having it outside in a public place, people are bringing the library, to the community. The other thing that I would love to look into is ways that we could have the author either here, physically or virtually. As a book discussion leader, I'm in libraries or zooming into libraries across the state, and everybody does it differently. So just, find out what works for your library. One of the libraries I'd like to mention is the DeSmet Library, and I've been going out there, I think 2 times a year since about 2010. It's just fun to see how this group comes back year after year, and it continues to grow. And so in fall 21, we were outside and out on the lawn, and it was just wonderful. But I just want to say, if at your library you're discouraged because maybe only 2 or 3 people are showing up to some of your programs. By having the one book every year, it's a great way to develop a book club. And I know in Schmidt, the same women, come back year after year, and each year it's a little bit bigger, people reaching out.
Thank you, Jean. And it's so true. We know that it takes time to build those programs and people to get comfortable with participating, and that word of mouth is the best way to spread that news, right? As you come, bring a friend the next time and take part. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit more about the Young Readers One Book, which is a little different from the One Book South Dakota we were just talking about?
Yes, I would love to. This is a much newer program, but it really took off when we started it in 2014. We've always had children's authors and illustrators involved in the South Dakota Festival of Books, but we never felt like we were reaching youth in the ways that we wanted to. We didn't feel like our reach was as broad as we liked, and we didn't feel like they were really getting what they could out of the festival. And it was just kind of a serendipitous moment where we happened to be speaking with Candlewick Press, who publishes Kate DiCamillo's books, in about 2013. And they were looking for her books to be used as community reads of a sort. And we thought, what a great idea. Why couldn't we model this to some extent after our One Book South Dakota program for adults? So 2014 was our very first Young Readers One Book and Young Readers Festival of Books. And we chose The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, which is a wonderful book. And it was, of course, a huge hit. Kate DiCamillo came and spoke to thousands of fourth graders that year. And she's just wonderful. The kids were excited. They cheer because she is essentially a rock star in the children's publishing world. And it was just so fun and had so much energy that we decided we really needed to continue this. So since 2014, this has been a part of our programming. We run the Young Readers program a little bit differently. Rather than having books to lend out, we buy the books to give away to students. And the programming for these books is largely led by the schools. They can use them in the classroom, but the kids can also take them home. Part of it is getting books in kids' hands and saying, this is your book. You don't have to leave it at school or share it. The teachers have some wonderful ideas for what to do to make those books come alive. And so then by the time the author or illustrator visits, the students are absolutely so excited, and it's just a wonderful experience. So it's more of a giveaway program. It's very much focused in the schools. Named our One Book for Young Readers for 2022, and it's going to be Smashie, McPerter, and the Mystery of Room 11, and it's the beginning of a series. We love to do series because, as you probably know, once a kid or an adult, frankly, finds a book that they love to continue on with the series. It's written by Griffin, and she will come and she will visit in the fall. We have formalized what Jean started doing for us in, I think, probably right away in 2014 or 2015, because it was the DeSmet Library again,
Yes.
who said, wouldn't this be a great idea to have a kids book group to discuss it? And so they called us and said, could you do the same thing? And we said, well, why not? We have the books. So we ended up sending the books, just lending them to the library. And Jean was the scholar, and she led a group discussion with some young people who had read the book. And then she continued to do that in the years following. And so this year, for the first time, we have formalized that as making it an official part of our Speakers Bureau. So if you go to that sdhumanities.org and look at the Speakers Bureau, you will find that not only do we have scholars who are listed as one book discussion leaders, but also some who are specifically noted as young readers, one book discussion leaders.
Oh, that's so exciting to know that now you could have two programs for your library, looking at the adult programming and then looking at for children as well, and then having that support of South Dakota Humanities Council to include those activities or a scholar to bring in to really enhance that. When I worked in the elementary schools in North Dakota, we did One Book, One School, and I volunteered to read to those students who might have not had a chance to read the night before, or to catch them up at morning recess. And we did a series book too, and it was so great to get them engaged. And the rest of that series just flew off the shelf after that. So hopefully librarians can get them hooked and maybe continue to do group discussions with more of the books in the series too. Jean, I want to know what you want librarians to take from this interview today.
Oh, I guess, honestly, the people at the South Dakota Humanities Council are some of the, not just the nicest people around, but they are so approachable. Oh, it's not like it's a scary thing to email them or call them. They, believe me, librarians, they love books as much as you do. I never knew until I became a librarian how crazy hectic the library can be. We all present ourselves as being such calm, sane people, but we're always multitasking. And this is one of these programs that will not take huge amounts of your time, so even now, as I'm looking forward, planning our summer programs, I'll be including the South Dakota Humanities Council's programs for young readers. And I'm sure Zach will definitely look into it for olders. One of the most interesting One Book South Dakota book discussions I led was last year with the Scotland Library. And it was multi-age on Zoom. And one of the participants was a high school teacher, and she encouraged her students to take part in it. And we had readers, in their teens up to the 80s and 90s. And we figured out, I think, that we had a representative person from every decade. And it was just fun to hear so many people coming to a book with different perspectives on characters and different situations. And really, book people, we're all kindred spirits. And what a great way to bring people together. So librarians, I just really encourage you to look into this because, there are so many ways to make it just right for your own libraries.
Thank you so much, Jean. And I love the idea of librarians collaborating with other libraries near them, or, as you said, holding a Zoom meeting and gathering patrons of all ages if possible. What a great way to start your program with a book bundle from the South Dakota State Library and the South Dakota Humanities Council. We have collaborated together to provide this bundle for you if you contact me after you've watched this vlog and help celebrate 50 years for the South Dakota Humanities Council with us. So make sure you reach out and send me an email and we'll get that sent your way. Okay, it's time to wrap up the vlog. And each time we are looking for book recommendations. So I want to start with the early literacy, that birth to kindergarten age range. Jean, do you have a recommendation for our librarians?
I certainly do. And I brought my favorite librarian helper along.
Hello, Gilly.
And Gilly is a little goat that lives here at the library, and she's with me at story time activities, online story times. So this is our resident goat expert. One of my favorite books this season is called The Littlest Yak by Lou Frazier, illustrated by Kate Hindley. And it's about a little yak who aspires to tallness and is somewhat frustrated with her smallness. But by the end, she realizes she is just perfect the way she is. I've used in story times, 4-year-olds were able to follow quite well. It's full of magnificent wordplay, but it would also work very well for a read aloud for early elementary as well. And the illustrations are just fantastic. And I think Gilly wishes that she were a yak, or at least had a yak hat. Elementary readers, I don't have the book with me because it's checked out. It's a wonderful book by Gary Schmidt called Long Road on a Short Day. It's a great father-son family story. And the father needs to trade up to bring home a cow for his wife, for the family. As the boy goes along, wow, there are other things that his father is trading up for that he thinks would be more interesting than a cow. But it just has a beautiful ending, wonderful read aloud for families.
All right, Jean, do you have anything that you would recommend for the teens?
I just finished reading a book called Red, White, and Whole. And actually, I would recommend this for tweens, that 10 to 14 age group. It's a heartfelt book written in verse about a girl who's growing up in the United States whose parents are from India. So part of the book is learning to live with both cultures. There's also a lot of medical information. In fact, the author is a graduate of Harvard Medical School. But it's a very accessible book, and it also deals with all those early teen situations that people are dealing with. It was a Newbery Honor Book book, I believe. And so I highly recommend it. I read it in one gulp.
I love it. Thank you, Jean. Jennifer, do you have any recommendations?
Yes, so following up on Jean's, I have a teen and young adult recommendation, and it's probably going to be familiar to many of you. It's The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. It's just one of the most meaningful, educational, enlightening, emotional books that I had read in quite a while when I read it a few years ago. And of course, there's a movie of it now too, but it takes place in Nazi Germany. It's narrated by Death, which from the very start makes it a unique and sort of interesting book in terms of voice. And the main character is a foster girl who lives near Munich, Germany. Her name is Liesel, and she steals books, as the title might suggest. Mostly because she just wants to have and hold as many books as she can. They're sort of fascinating objects to her. And she shares the books sometimes with her neighbors. She shares them with a Jewish man who happens to be hiding in the family's basement. And it brings them to all sorts of discussions. And it also talks about, the book burning that went on during the Nazi regime and, the importance of books in people's lives, as well as all sorts of different topics associated with the Third Reich and freedom of thought and freedom to read, which turns out to be a very timely topic today as well, something that's being discussed a lot around the world. And at the same time, it's just also a beautiful coming of age story. Difficult in some ways, but really moving and wonderful.
Thank you, Jennifer. I have personally read it and I would highly recommend it as well. And I think that would work in the adult category as well,
Yes.
as our teens. Do you have anything else to share for the adults?
Yes, I thought, well, for the adults, I thought I'd share a recommendation from my very favorite author, the subject of my master's thesis many years ago when she had many fewer books out. But that is Louise Erdrich's latest, called The Sentence, and it just came out this fall. Now, Louise Erdrich was a One Book South Dakota author in 2008 with her book, The Master Butcher's Singing Club, which was a wonderful selection, and it takes place in a bookstore in Minneapolis. And as it happens, Louise owns a bookstore in Minneapolis called Birch Bark Books. If you're ever there, you should check it out. And it takes place over the course of a single year, primarily 2020. So what that means is you get the bookstore, one of the regular customers at the bookstore dies, and one of the employees at the bookstore believes that that regular customer is haunting the store. And so that begins the first conflict of the book, or the first plot point, but then follows the pandemic, and the bookstore struggles to stay open or to serve their customers in whatever way they can. And then follows, very nearby, the murder of George Floyd and the protests that follow that, and the general upheaval throughout the entire city of Minneapolis. And it follows how these characters deal with all of these things. Just a really, really unique look at a place that is both real and fictional, and helping us to process what's happened recently. And one of the best things, if you love book recommendations, is that at the end of this book, there are about 4 pages of book titles that were mentioned all throughout the book.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. We're always looking to add to our list, and such a timely and relevant topic happening. It's amazing how quickly those books can come out after that. Jennifer and Jean, I just want to thank you for taking the time to visit with me today and leading others by sharing your knowledge of the One Book South Dakota and your book recommendations. Just thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
And remember, librarians are not just buns and shushing anymore. Bye, South Dakota librarians. See you again soon.